Hey, my name is Kristen Burleson, and I'm doing my video topic on the vertebral column and the different regions of the vertebral column. So let's get started. Alright guys, I wanted to do my topic on the vertebral column because I noticed whenever I was in anatomy, I struggle with the vertebral column a lot. Just with so many different articulations and so many different names, I just didn't know if I was ever going to get the full concept of all of the different structures. So I want to share with you guys how I learned to distinguish them very, very quick so I could learn them quickly and get on to my next topic. Okay, so we all know that there are 5 different regions of the vertebral column, and they are all called their cervical region, which is from C1 to C7, the thoracic region, which is from T1 to T12, the lumbar region, which is from L1 to L5, the sacral region, which is from S1 to S5, and the coccyx region, which the sacral and the coccyx region are the easiest to learn and to identify because they're fused together. So they are one bone and one entity, which means they don't really have that many names. And yeah, they're just way easier to learn in my opinion. So yeah, let me help you learn how to distinguish the differences between all the regions within the vertebral column, as well as distinguishing all the names of the surfaces, etc., of the individual vertebrae. Okay, so the first region that we will talk about is the cervical region. The cervical region consists of 7 individual vertebrae articulating with one another, which is also referred to as, C1, C2, C3, and so on and so forth. So C1 and C2, they have other names that they refer to as. They're very, very distinct. C1 is also referred to as atlas, whereas C2 is referred to as axis. C1 and C2 look quite different from one another due to their structural differences, so that's a good thing. You won't get those confused at all because of how different they look. C1 is composed of numerous articulations and surfaces. The superior portion, which is the upper portion of the bone, contains the superior articular facet, the transverse process, and the transverse foramen, whereas the inferior portion, which is the bottom part of the bone, has the inferior articular facet and the fovea dentis, which is the facet for the structure named dens on C2, which we'll talk about in just a minute. The best way I have known and practiced is to pay attention to the names of the surfaces, or whatever the case may be. Facet means a smooth-like surface that articulates with another bone. So if you see facet, you can go ahead and assume, okay, well, this is going to be a smooth-like structure on the bone. Foramen is an opening. So when you see foramen, you'll think, oh, okay, so this will be an opening somewhere on that bone. And as well as process, process is a projection. So you'll just think, okay, so this will be a projection on that specific bone. Okay. So to move on, we're going to start off with these different types of categories that will help them be easier to name. For example, the superior articular facet would be the superior, which is the highest point. Articular means articulates with another bone, and facet, which is a smooth-like articulation surface. So, like I just said, like if it was the inferior part, you just go to the inferior part of the bone, the articulating part of that bone, and the facet, which is the smooth-like structure on that bone. C1 also has 4 other structures with names. Those names are anterior tubercle, posterior tubercle, and an anterior and posterior arch. Those are very easy to spot due to their names as well. Anterior and posterior tell you where they're located on, which is the front and the back of the bone, as well as the names tubercle, which means small rounded like projection, and arch, which is a universal term that we all use and means a curved like surface. So this will apply to the inferior portion of C1 as well. So to just do a recap of what I was just explaining, we all learn the first thing that we learn in anatomy is the anatomical terms. So that's another thing that helps you whenever you're starting to learn different structures and different things on any kind of bone for that matter, not just the vertebral column. You can relay it back to, okay, well, I've already learned this, so that will help me move on whenever I've fully learned this and I've retained this and I don't have to go back and study it anymore. So like the anterior tubercle, you can say, okay, well, it's on the front of the bone, and the tubercle which means that it's a small rounded like projection. You can just go, okay, well, that's what this is, and you would actually point. And right here, see, I actually show it. So you see I have that anterior tubercle, so that's like a tubercle. You can see that it's a round-like surface. The arch, which is a curved-like structure, and the superior articular facet, which, here, let me scroll over where we can actually see it. If I can get it to go over. There we go. Superior articular facet, you see it's that smooth-like structure. It's on the superior portion of the bone, and it's a facet which is smooth and articulates with the bone that's above it and below it. So there's C1. The next thing we'll talk about is C2, and it shares some of the same names as C1, such as superior and inferior articular facet, the transverse process, which is on the inferior part, and the transverse process, but also the C2 shares names, or actually has different names of its own, like dens, which we were talking about earlier. So the superior portion comprises of the dens, which we were just talking about, and like I was saying, it was a structure that looks just like a tooth, which is why it's called dens. The body of the vertebra, which you'll see the body of the vertebra will be in almost every single vertebra, of each region. So you'll see body, the vertebral body, you'll see that referred to a lot within the different regions of the vertebral column. So, okay, so the superior portion, the body of the vertebra, which lies inferior to the dens, the vertebral foramen and the lamina, the pedicle, and the spinous process, which you'll see spinous process a lot, just like you'll see the other ones that I was explaining. Spinous process is really easy to spot out because it's on the spine, so that will go ahead and tell you, okay, well, this is on the posterior portion of the bone, and the process will just tell you that it's the process of the actual the structure itself. So to be able to distinguish the structures that C2 is comprised of, you'll also look at the word and connect it with the structure, just like you were doing with C1. So lamina is referred to as a broad plate or a layer of a structure, which can be connected with the portion between the spinous process and the pedicle. And the pedicle is referred to as a stern, narrow-like structure, which can be connected with the portion between the lamina and the transverse foramen. And just one second, and I'll pull that up and show you guys. Okay, so you see the dens. See, that looks kind of like a tooth. And there's the superior articular facet, which we were talking about on C1 as well, the body of the vertebra. And right here, you'll see C2. C1 doesn't have this, but C2 does, and it's vertebral foramen. And that one's very, very easy to know. Like, that one's on pretty much every single region in the vertebral column. That would be one of the easiest ones, in my opinion, that you'll learn, is vertebral foramen. So foramen is opening, vertebral, that's obviously the vertebral column, and that's in the middle, so that would be very easy to spot. And here's spinous process, see? Those look very, very similar on each vertebra in each region. Very, very similar. You can just tell that that's like the spine area. The lamina, which the lamina was referred to as a broad plate or a layer of a structure which can be connected with the portion between the spinous process and the pedicle. So you see the spinous process and the pedicle. And the pedicle is referred to as a stern, narrow-like structure which can be connected with the portion between the lamina and the transverse foramen. So, see, there's transverse foramen right here. Or, excuse me, transverse process. The transverse process and the lamina. And the pedicle is right in between it. Okay, so to pretty much sum up everything that I've explained, what I did was I learned the definitions of each word, because I have a very, very hard time of just trying to learn a word and not even know exactly what it means. I'm just seeing it labeled on a structure like this. See, like transverse, like I didn't exactly know what that meant in anatomical terms, and that means just horizontal. So that's on the horizontal plane of the actual structure. And so I just looked up the definitions of everything, and if you look up the definitions of every single word that you come across, it will be so much easier to identify all of the different structures and all of the different surfaces of just everything that you'll learn in anatomy, and not just the vertebral column. like I was saying, most of the above names that I have mentioned will be used within the rest of the cervical region, as well as the thoracic region, the lumbar region. These regions are also comprised of other articulations and facets within their list of structures. So there are a bunch of names that I did not list that, like I was just showing you guys examples, like you'll look at the word, and if you don't know what it means, just go look it up real quick and just, like study that definition. And once you've got that definition down pat, you'll start learning these terms way, way quicker and learning these models way, way quicker.